Over the past 2 to 3 years, I've been working on a project codenamed ngObjects, creating basically a very WoW-inspired web framework that I hope to be able to migrate all of my WoW applications to at some point. I think I'm now at the point where I can share some of the progress, and I'd like to do that by demonstrating the creation of a simple ngObjects project. So, let's go. I'm going to create a project in Eclipse, just a basic Maven project, no archetypes yet. And I'm going to place that here and call it Woohoo, since this is fun. I'm going to add it to the working set here and just give it the same group ID and artifact ID, since those don't really matter. And we're going to configure the project with some base functionality. I just told it that we are going to be using JDK21. I added the ngObjects dependency, the Jetty dependency, since that's our adapter, and the SLFJ framework for logging. So, we have an empty Maven project, and I'm going to create a class called application, as is tradition. And this class will inherit from ngApplication, and we're going to create a main method that will invoke ngApplicationRun, passing in the command line arguments and the application class. This should look very familiar to you. We run it, and by default the application runs on port 1200, and we have a running ngObjects application. So now I'd like to add some basic functionality, and I'm going to do that by adding a route. This is basically equivalent to a direct action, as in code that I can invoke via a URL, but this just looks a little nicer. We also have regular direct actions, but this is more fun to demo. Okay, so the path hello is mapped to a function that accepts our request as a parameter and will return a new ng response, our equivalent to WoW response, with a string hello world and status 200. Let's now see if we can invoke that route. And we can. We now have a single route that returns a single response. Let's do something more fun, like creating a component. I'm going to add a new route that is going to map to the URL page, and we're going to create our template. To do that, we're going to create a folder called components, and inside that folder we are going to create a file called main.html. Add some text to know that we are using the template. And like in WoW, I'm going to return this template by just invoking page with name, sending in the component's name, and using the requests context. And we now have a main template. Now, all websites need wrapper components, of course, for the look, so we are going to add a separate component, and we create a new template called wrapper.html. And this will just be a basic HTML document. And like in WoW, we are going to add a WoW component content, or our equivalent of that, using the WoW content tag. And just so we have something in the look, it will look like this, and we'll wrap this around the main template, just like we would do in WoW. I wonder if this works. Oh my god, unbalanced dynamic tag. Oh, I forgot to add one thing here. So, now we have a wrapper component, and I think it's about time we add some functionality to our main component. So I'm going to create a class called main, and this class will inherit from ng component, our equivalent of WoW component. And in here we are going to create a string called my name. with my name as the value. Inside main, I'm going to link to that variable by using a regular VoStream with a value of my name. And now we are fetching values from our component class. Just to demonstrate that we could modify this variable, I'm going to create a form. And we're going to add a text field that's also linked to the myname variable, and we're going to add a submit button for the form, just invoking context.page, returning the same page just again. Session management is fun. So I should be able to modify our variable like so. Okay, now let's do something a little more advanced by creating, for example, the classic guest book example. So I'm going to add a list of strings, and I'm going to add an iteration variable called just current name, and I'm also going to add an action method called add name, which of course will just add my name to names and return the same page once again. Okay, so let's try going to the template, and we are going to make our submit button invoke the add name method, and we are going to add a repetition, which of course has the list names and iterates over current name and displays the content of current name. Oh yes, one feature of the framework is that you have to spell the names of the tags correctly. Yeah, irritating, I know. And we have a repetition. Now we might want to display a different heading, and I'd like to control that from the main component, so I think we might want to add a binding. So I'm going to create a new class for the wrapper component. And I'm going to give it a variable called heading. And in our wrapper component, I'm just going to make that be the title of the page. And at the moment, this should be totally empty. But we go to the main component and we add a binding. And we are passing binding values. Okay, so let's add a style sheet to this. So that should demonstrate some of the resource management, at least from the web server resource side. So I'm going to create a new folder and call it web server resources. In there I'm going to create a new file and call it main.css. And let's just tell the body that we are going to have a sans serif font. So let's go to the wrapper component, and I'm going to add a style sheet with a file name of main.css. And we now have sans serif fonts. Looking at the code, these are the URLs for resources at the moment, and we can look at the file here. Everything works as planned. Now, finally, let's do something fun with something more graphical, like adding some images. I'm going to go back to the main component and just remove all of this stuff. And inside the code, I'm going to, let's say we are going to read a folder of images. So I'm going to return files list something from a path. Let's create that variable, and I know I have a folder on my desktop containing images, so that will be user.he desktop photos. And oh, this returns a stream, but we want a list, so we do it like this, and just make the method throw that exception. So we go back to our main component, and I'm going to iterate over the paths with the item current path. Let's just start with something simple, like showing the value of the current path, just to see if we are properly iterating over the photos. Yes, we are. So if I want to display the image, we need to add some logic. I'm going to say just get the bytes from the photo, read all the bytes of the current path, throw the exception, and I'm going to go back to the main component, and we are going to change the string to an image. And like in WoW image, we have a data binding, which I'm going to link up to current data, and we are going to have to add a MIME type binding as well, since this is a data image. Oh, did I misspell something? Current image it was, sorry. Current image. Oh, we have images, a little bit big, so I'm going to add a width attribute here. And we have plenty of images. I think this is a DS-store file here, that's fun. And just finally, to demonstrate that you can invoke an action to return a different page or component, I'd like to be able to select an image and display that in full size. So I'm going to go to components and add a new file called photodetail.html. And I'm also going to add a class called photodetail that will extend the ng component class. And let's just keep track of the data. We add a single image to that with a data binding of data and a MIME type of image, JPEG. And of course we put it inside our nice little wrapper component. Inside main, I'm going to create a new action method that's called viewImage, and we're going to invoke page with name photodetail.class, and page.data will equal current data, current image, of course. And this means we now have to bind our action view image. Sorry, it's 12 o'clock here. I'm a little tired, working slowly. And let's see if I can click one of the images, and I can. It's a little big, so I'm going to go back to photo detail and say width equals 800 pixels. Much nicer. So now we have multiple components, and we have, well, everything we need. This is just a pure demonstration of the basics. There's of course much more to this, but yeah, I hope to be able to demonstrate something more pretty soon. So good night.